David Campos immigrated to the U.S. when he was 14 from Guatemala and attended Stanford University as an undocumented student and the Harvard Law School when he became a resident. He later became a deputy of the city attorney for the city and county of San Francisco, served as a general counsel for San Francisco Unified School District, and currently a member of San Francisco Board of Supervisors, representing District 9 since 2008.
Thank you. Muy buenas tardes. Good afternoon. Maybe it's evening. I'd like to begin by saying that it wasn't too long ago that in 1993, I was one of you, like one of these students sitting at my graduation. And I think there's something, every graduation is unique, is special. But I think there's something unique and special when you go through the experience of being an undocumented student, getting to this point. I don't think that people fully understand the challenge that it means to us, having been continuing to be perhaps undocumented, to get to this point. So to the audience, I want to say this. If you can join me, if you can, in giving a standing ovation to these students, a standing ovation because they deserve it. I know how hard it is for you to get to this point. Thank you. So let me tell you about my experience. I came to this country when I was 14 from this little town, Puerto Barrios, in Guatemala. And I don't think that I, as a kid from Guatemala, ever thought that I would be graduating from college in the United States. And I can only imagine for each and every one of you, when you sit here and you think about where you were born, about where you grew up, where you come from, and to now look around and see yourself getting a 4-year degree from this incredible institution, San Francisco State. How incredible it is. Absolutely. And getting a college education in any place, especially in expensive San Francisco, is quite an accomplishment. But we have to go an extra mile to get to this point. For one thing, my experience, and I tell people, I literally had to climb mountains to be here. It was on January 31st, 1985, that as a 14-year-old, my mom, my 2 little sisters, and I were literally climbing mountains to get through the border. It was a pretty cold night, and I remember the image. First of all, I have never been as cold as I was that night, and Guatemala is a tropical climate, so the idea of being in the desert late at night. And I remember being on the Mexico side of the border, looking over the fence that is the border, and then seeing the lights on the other side of that fence. And thinking, how impossible a dream it felt that I would actually get to the other side. And thought, that will never happen. Something's going to go wrong. And I can imagine that for each and every one of you, perhaps the experience was different. Perhaps it wasn't the border. Perhaps it was something else. Perhaps it was a different part of the border. But you had the same experience. And then when I started junior high school, I had the challenge that because I did not speak English and I spoke Spanish, and when I spoke English, I spoke it with an accent, people thought that the fact that I spoke Spanish meant that I was dumb. Little do they know that the fact that you speak English with an accent means that you're already pretty fluent in another language. And I actually think that in many respects, the fact that I was born in Guatemala and that I came here as an immigrant was an advantage, and that's what I want to touch upon. You know, Yadira Sanchez said, you know, that the system was not meant to be for us. People of color, I think is what she said. I'm going to respectfully but strongly disagree. The system was precisely meant and has evolved to where it is today because it is supposed to be for us, precisely for people like us. Because this country, when you think about it, this country was founded on the idea that merit, above everything else, should rule whether or not, should govern whether or not you move forward. And even though the country that talks about freedom began with slavery, began with sexism, women not being able to vote, it began with, you know, it continued with segregation, it continued with discrimination against LGBT people. Throughout history, this country has recognized that what makes this country great, it's the diversity of the people that come to it, and that with each group that comes into this country, we become better as a society. We truly become that vision of the American dream. And so this country is supposed to be our country, and we, by virtue of being people that struggle to get to this point, are as American as anyone else in this country today. We are the embodiment of what it means to be American. And the fact that you don't have a legal document, perhaps, that says that you're in the country, you're authorized to be here, does not negate the fact that you are as American as they come. And that's what I'm here to tell you. That the fact that you have struggled to get to this point gives you a gift. So when I went to Stanford, I didn't just have to worry about writing that essay. I didn't have to worry just about, you know, filling out that application. I had to worry about not getting deported every single day that I was at that campus. And I'll tell you, and I still have it in my closet, I have a Stanford sweatshirt that I wore everywhere. Because to me, that was my salvation. To me, this is, you know, it started in 1989, so it was 1989 to 1993. To me, people would never think that a young kid wearing a Stanford sweatshirt was undocumented. And you know what? It worked. It worked. And when I got admitted into Stanford, they did not know what to do with me because they asked in the application for a social security number. I did not have a social security number. And so they didn't know what to do with me, so they called me and said, you know, are you in the United States? Well, yes. Well, I think that maybe the best way to approach the processing of your enrollment is to treat you as an international student. So I was like, okay, because you don't have a social security. And so I was admitted into Stanford as an international student that happened to live in the United States. And I went to orientation with international students that came from other parts of the world. It was actually very eye-opening because the international students that go to Stanford actually come from the wealthiest families in all parts of the world. I was simply an undocumented kid living in South Central Los Angeles. So it was a very interesting experience. But what that meant for me is that I had to go the extra mile in everything that I did. I had to be resourceful. It wasn't enough for me to do whatever everything else my colleagues and my peers had to do. I knew that I was different and that the requirements, the rules were a little bit higher for me. And I'll tell you, that is the greatest gift that I have received as a human being. Because what that does to you, it creates a resilience. It creates the ability to adapt to just about any environment. And I'll tell you that for me, since graduating from Stanford, I went out to Harvard Law School. And the way I see it is, there's nothing that people can throw my way that I cannot handle, because the very fact that I am here today means that I have the brains, I have the skills, and that I have what it takes to be successful. And that's what I'm here to tell you, that the mere fact that with all the struggles that you and your family have gone through, that you have made it to this point today, means that you are capable of anything. And in fact, I think that we forget that there is something unique about a family, about a people that pack up and go to a different country for a new life. What people forget is that in many respects, you represent the very best of the countries that you came from. And that's what actually has made the United States the most successful society in the history of the world, the richest society in the history of the world. There have been 70 billion human beings that have existed over all of human history. There are 7 billion today. And you are one of 300 million that is living in this day and age. 300 million out of 70 billion human beings that have existed in the wealthiest country in the history of the world. And why is this country so successful? Because throughout its history, the most talented, the most entrepreneurial, the most innovative people from every part of the world have come here. And that is the richness of this country. And so the fact that you are here from whatever country you come from means that you are among the most resourceful, talented, innovative people from those countries. And I am in awe of my parents. And I think that my parents instilled that innovation and that lack of fear to do new things in me. And I'm telling you, that is something that will serve you for the rest of your life. And that's why I'm here to tell you that I know there are going to be great things coming from each of you. Yarira, you said, that failure, happens. And you know what? Failure happens. But the thing about failure is that failure is part of success. Winston Churchill said, success consists of going from failure to failure without any loss of enthusiasm. The most successful people in the world are people that have seen failure and nonetheless have moved forward. And that is precisely what I want you to think about, that yes, you will fail, but with that failure, you're going to learn new things. You were going to learn how not to make the same mistake. But more importantly, you're going to learn, and this is what you already have, you're going to learn that the fact that you have challenge, the fact that something is difficult, doesn't mean that it's impossible. To the contrary, that with challenge comes opportunity. And I see it. I see it with my colleagues. I went to Harvard Law School, and I know that some of my colleagues had a tough time perhaps dealing with an exam, dealing with a subject matter. And I was so used to having to work harder than anyone else that at some point it just didn't really matter how difficult it was, because I sort of figured, you know what, it's going to be difficult, but how much more difficult than what I've gone through can it possibly be? And the other thing that I would say, and this is something that I hope that you remember, and I will leave you with this. I think that the biggest challenge that each and every one of us have as individuals is truly ourselves. I really believe that the reason why sometimes people are unable to achieve an objective that they set for themselves is perhaps because they themselves get in their own way. And I think that we get in our way because of that insecurity, those doubts, those second thoughts. And look, I'm not saying doubt and insecurity is not part of life. I have doubt and insecurity every moment of my existence. But we mistake fear and security with the ability to overcome that fear. You know, the most heroic people are not the people who were unafraid. The most heroic people are the people who, notwithstanding that fear, went that extra mile and still did it. And so I am here to tell you and to challenge you, you graduates, to challenge yourselves to not set limits for what you are capable of. You know what? So a woman from your background has never achieved a certain position. Well, be the first one to do that. So that when that young girl who is perhaps in middle school or is going to be in high school, by the time she gets to be your age, she can look at you as a role model and can see that it's not impossible to do that. If you are, an openly gay person, and perhaps there hasn't been an openly gay person in your position, then be the trailblazer that actually makes that happen and makes history and changes how that narrative works. That is what you are capable of. And the only limitation, I believe, that I had was those limitations that I placed upon myself. And then, as you go forward, and I'm going to hear, I know I'm going to be reading about each of you, I'm going to be talking about, my God, the class of 2016, the dreamers of San Francisco State. They have gone on to amazing and great things. The one thing that I would ask, besides not putting limitations on yourself, is that you also remember in everything you do that you have a responsibility to make sure that whatever opportunities you've had, that whatever other chances people have given to you, you have to provide those opportunities to other people. You have a responsibility to make sure that your fellow graduates are as successful as you are, but also that the young people in particular, that the young people understand that being Latino or Latina, that being an immigrant, that speaking English as a second language is not a sign of failure, but to the contrary, are attributes that define success. So that when people talk about the dreamer, that the focus is not on the undocumented piece, but on the dreamer piece. Because the dreamer ultimately is about the American dream. You embody, you represent the very best of this country. You are what this country is about, and you are going to show the rest of this world that this community of dreamers, that this country belongs to them as much as it does anyone else. Thank you very much.